pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the evening of May 10th, 1864, as the Civil War ground on into its fourth straight year, 26-year-old James Robert Montgomery, a private in the Confederate Signal Corps in Virginia, wrote a letter to his father back home in Camden, Mississippi, dripping blood on the paper as he wrote from the horrific shoulder wound he had sustained a few hours earlier.
Dear Father, this is my last letter to you. I have been struck by a piece of shell, and my right shoulder is horribly mangled. And I know death is inevitable. I am very weak, but I write to you because I know you would be delighted to read a word from your dying son. I know death is near, that I will die far from home and friends of my early youth. But I have friends here too who are kind to me. My friend Fairfax will write you at my request and give you the particulars of my death. My grave will be marked so that you may visit it if you desire to do so. It is optionary with you whether you let my remains rest here or in Mississippi. I would like to rest in the graveyard with my dear mother and brothers, but it's a matter of minor importance. Give my love to all my friends. My strength fails me. My horse and my equipments will be left for you. Again, a long farewell to you. May we meet in heaven. Your dying son, J.R. Montgomery.
James Montgomery's friend, Fairfax, did write soon thereafter, forwarding some of his effects and assuring his father that he had been conscious to the end and that he had died at peace with himself and his Maker. But it was little consolation. Though the grave had been marked, the family was never able to find it, and were thus never able to realize their fond hope of bringing their dead son home.
or north. Ours all. Our young men, once so handsome and so joyous, taken from us. The son from the mother, the husband from the wife, the dear friend from the dear friend. And everywhere among these countless graves, we see, and ages yet may see, on monuments and gravestones, singly or in masses, to thousands or tens of thousands, the significant word, unknown. Walt Whitman, 1865.
Nothing in the experience of the 31 million people living in America on the eve of the Civil War could have prepared Americans for what was about to break over them over the next 4 years. It was only in part the shocking trauma of secession itself, as the long-festering debate over freedom and slavery, union and states' rights, burst into the open following Abraham Lincoln's election in November 1860 and tore the country in two. Something else would challenge Americans over the next 4 years. Something even more fundamental. Something different from the task of saving or dividing a nation, ending or maintaining slavery, or winning a military conflict. With the coming of the Civil War, the first modern war, the first mass war of the modern age, death would enter the experience of the American people and the body politic of the American nation as it never had before, on a scale and in a manner no one had ever imagined possible, and under circumstances for which the nation would prove completely unprepared.
History is full of brutal surprises that we really don't see coming. Nobody predicted Antietam. Nobody predicted Gettysburg. What the Civil War brought was this terrible modern confrontation of a set of old 18th and 19th century values with modern warfare. And the result, of course, is mass slaughter that is harder and harder for anyone to explain, even to themselves.
The unimaginable scale of the slaughter, the sheer numbers of the dead, would be all but impossible to comprehend. Nearly 2.5% of the population would die in the conflict. An estimated 750,000 people in all, more than in all other American wars combined. Never before and never since have so many Americans died in any war, by any measure or reckoning.
Transpose the percentage of dead that mid-19th century America faced into our own time. 7 million dead if we had the same percentage. What would we as a nation today be like if we faced the loss of 7 million individuals? And so it invaded just about everyone's life in one way or another.
The enormous tide of death unleashed by the war posed challenges for which there were no ready answers when the war began. Challenges so large, they frequently overwhelmed the abilities of individuals and institutions to respond to them. Challenges that called forth, slowly at first, by fits and starts, immense and eventually heroic efforts by individuals, groups, and the government, as Americans worked to improvise new solutions, new institutions, new ways of coping with death on an unimaginable scale. Before the Civil War, there were no national cemeteries in America. No provisions for identifying the dead, or for notifying next of kin, or for providing aid to the suffering families of dead veterans. No federal relief organizations, no effective ambulance corps, no adequate federal hospitals, no federal provisions for burying the dead. No Arlington Cemetery. No Memorial Day.
The United States embarked on a new relationship with death in a whole series of ways. As a nation, it embarked on a new relationship with death because its survival would be assured and defined by the deaths of so many hundreds, thousands of people. So it would become inseparable from death in that sense. In a second way, the United States would develop a new relationship with death in a national sense because of the pension system, the reburial system, the bureaucracy of death that would transform the nature of the federal government. So it would become a different nation, a stronger, more centralized nation with more responsibilities, partly because of taking on these obligations that would grow out of Civil War death. But then there are all the changes for individuals who are living in a world of mourning and loss in the North and in the South, where ultimately 20% of white men of military age were going to die, and where everyone had lost a loved one. And so lives were shattered in undefined ways, often because so many of the dead were unknown. And ideas about what death was would be changed by the intensity and widespread nature of this experience.
Certainly, as we think about the obligation of citizens to the state and what the state owes its citizens, particularly with regard to the thing that we, in some sense, the only thing we really own, which is our own body and our own mortality. The Civil War made us rethink that definition as a country and as a people. What do governments owe to their bodies, to the bodies that make them up? And that becomes a central question in the war. In the Civil War, I think we come as a nation to the insistence that citizenship is predicated on the willingness of people to lay down their lives for the state. That's the absolute bottom line. So I think the war casts not just a long shadow, but a long sense of reality over who we are and how we deal with really those fundamental questions. You know, it's everybody dies. Our mortality is assured. But the way we grapple with that reality changes over time. And the Civil War shows us that they did change and how they changed. And to be alive to that change is something that the Civil War, I think, asks us to do.
But now, yeah, make all the demons quiet, yeah, we were built to thrive, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah, make all the demons quiet, yeah, we were built to thrive, yeah, I think that we've all had enough, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan, they know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. It's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive, and save it. What keeps you up at night, yeah, make all the demons quiet, yeah, we were built to thrive, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah, make all the demons quiet, yeah, we were built to thrive, yeah, I think that we've all had enough, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan, they know that we're calling it wrong.